violence doesn't always have to be physical. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you have let the person off the hook. What forgiveness means is that you have decided to release your desire to punish someone. The breakup from marriages and relationships that we have been heavily invested in, it's drama. And we need to call it for what it is. If we don't name it, face it, we won't make it. That's the bottom line.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Beauty in You podcast. I'm super excited for today's episode as we're going to talk about the power of healing and co-parenting. Our guest today is one of resilience, faith, and transformation. She's a co-parenting coach, empowering ex-partners to navigate heartbreak, embrace healing, and develop a life plan that allows them to show up emotionally whole for their children. Welcome to the Beauty in You podcast, Clover. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great, thanks. Wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you for being here and just sharing your inspirational story. I know that it's definitely going to touch the lives of my listeners. So with that being stated, can you go ahead and get us started on your healing journey?
Okay, so my healing journey, it was thrusted up on me. Let's start here. So years ago, it's now years ago, I always make reference to this Hurricane Gilbert because not only was there a geographic disaster, but in my life, it manifested as a real emotional battle. So at the time, my two older children were 4 years old and 5 weeks old. So you imagine you have just given birth and you're still wobbling on your feet, sleepless nights and all of that stuff that comes. Your physical healing as well is going on.
Yeah.
So I was thinking today that I have never shared this before. And I'm just remembering that when I was about 7 months pregnant, I think the doctor had put me on bed rest. So I was home for a little while. Then I went back to work. And I remember, and maybe this should have been a huge red flag at the time, but when you're pregnant, all you're thinking of is your unborn child, the joy of that child and everything else that comes with it, and just being physically and emotionally secure.
Yeah.
I cannot remember and will never justify why this happened. But I remember it was a weekend morning. I remember I was wearing a blue dress. I remember everything so well. And I was slapped in the face. That should have been a red flag. But when you are 7, going 8 months pregnant, all you're thinking about is a safe delivery for your child and your own emotional well-being and wellness. Fast forward, that baby was born, beautiful baby girl was born on the 9th of August 1988 it was. And I got home from hospital. Life was going along with everything that comes with a newborn. Anyway, then came the 9th of September. And there was this massive hurricane. It's in the annals of Caribbean geography as one of the worst of certainly of the 20th century for sure.
Wow.
And roofs were just lifted up. And this was all across the country. No power, no telephone service. It was just total destruction. So there was my emotional destruction taking place at the same time. And I lost my roof, watched the water leaking into this sunken living room at the time, and holding my little 5-week-old baby. What was great for me is that my mom was with me. And when evening came and we figured out that, nope, we can't stay here, and a wonderful neighbor, walking distance. So I said, okay, it's going to be safe to sleep with her because she had a full concrete slab so she didn't get affected. So we slept there. Then stayed with relatives for a few days because we're trying to get through to the rest of the family, about 2 hours drive away, to say, SOS, SOS, we need help here. So anyway, it took us about 3 days for that to happen. And then they came. And I went back with my mom to her house. Both of my parents were still alive then. And I remember when we were going over to another relative to spend those few days, my then husband looked at me and said, "Where I'm going, you can't come." I was just stunned, totally stunned. But anyway, again, I had to focus on a newborn. And so off we went to my mom's house. Didn't hear from him. I remember she got throat ulcers at the time. She was being breastfed, and she got throat ulcers at the time. My brother, who is now deceased, said, "Look, I'm going to take you to my pediatrician," who was nearby. So he did exactly that. And I remember he said to me, the pediatrician, "Yes, she has mouth ulcers and she's not able to swallow, but it will go away in a few days." And I'm saying, "Oh no, 5 weeks old? Nothing goes away in a few days when you have an infant." So later that week, again, my brother, off we went to the regular pediatrician we're accustomed to dealing with. And she said to me, "No, I can't treat this. I'm sending you to Dr. Lin, that's just a few steps down the road. He was an ENT specialist. And finally he said to me, "Yes, she has throat ulcers. I am going to give you a prescription where you have to paint the back of the throat every day, twice a day. Then she'll begin to eat again, as well as some antibiotics." I had communicated to her dad that all of this was going on. He never showed up. So these were all now signals that something is going downhill.
Right.
It's all going downhill. So the landlady where we were living at the time, she had said, "We will repair the house as long as you're sure you want it and you're coming back." And I said, "Yes, because I'm on maternity leave and I have to return to work." So I got back there a week or two before we moved in, and I had a lovely elderly neighbor who was much like my mom in terms of age and the relationship we had. And she said to me, "I saw your husband come over and he told me he's not coming back." And I said, "Wow, fancy that he would tell you that." I didn't say that to her, but I said, "Fancy he would tell you that." He didn't tell me. But then all these red flags, you're getting there. So I came back, went back to work, and I realized very quickly that I was totally on my own. Totally. There was no emotional support. There was no financial support. It was just everything was at zero. That's where it was. What made it worse for him, and I suppose the way things manifested, is that at this time also, he was out of a job. So I suspect he was having some level of emotional, internal battle that was causing him a lot of distress. But that doesn't have anything to do with your parental responsibilities. Even if you've decided by then, "I'm not coming back, this relationship is over for me."
Mhm.
But as I always say, you can divorce or you can leave a spouse, but it's devastating when you do that to your children, because that is really parental neglect. That is, there are no two ways about it. That's the signal. And that's the reality as well. It's total parenting neglect. So my older was in kindergarten. So that's about what he would do. He would pick her up and he would bring her home. But what began happening is that he began to behave in a very volatile manner, shouting. I tell people all the time, violence doesn't always have to be physical.
Yeah.
There's an aura of aggression and verbal tone that can be distressing. It can be very distressing. And in processing backwards, I often say to myself that maybe I was at physical risk, did not realize at the time. And I remember, as I said, what I shared today about being hit, I've never shared that with anyone. And I think at the time, my greatest concern was my parents, because I know that would have hit them terribly hard. And that would be something that would have been like a dagger going through them. And looking back, I think that was the main reason why I chose not to. And also because when you are processing separation, especially when you're processing with young children, it is in your best interest to be able to manage your emotions, especially when you realize that you are on your own. And I remember what hit me most when I realized that, yes, I'm on my own, was that I told myself, and this was what came to me, girl, you are not coming out of this any worse than if he was here. And something that I had really purposed, I was always going back to grad school, and it didn't matter what the circumstances. So I had this plan before he came into my life. And as I recognized the weight of the responsibility, because when you have young children now, you're changing diapers, you're feeding. I mean, they can't do anything for themselves. So it's physical work, emotional work, and financial work. It's all three. And when you are doing that with a sliver of support, that makes it really tough. But I kept my eyes on the responsibility that I had. And that I made it my motivation. And fortunately for me, I don't know if this term is used anymore, maybe outside of academia, I came from a rock solid nuclear family with a mom and dad who were extremely responsible, extremely respectful, and they were governed by a rock solid faith. Yeah. And so that was tremendously impactful in my life. I didn't realize it until I got to that fork in the road, how much the faith that had been manifested in my family, how much it became a lifeline. That's what happened. Some people go to drugs, they go to some form of dysfunction.
Yeah.
Well, I chose my faith. And it's very important for us to find a lifeline. And for each of us, it is going to be different. But I found my faith and I depended on it. It became front and center of my journey. And in my own coaching program, it's Heal, Grow, and Thrive. And we each have to find the way to healing. And I was more concerned about my personal growth. Everything that happens to you emotionally affects you spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to feel like I was beaten down and I had this baggage hanging around me. So I had to choose forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you have let the person off the hook. What forgiveness means is that you have decided to release your desire to punish someone, right? I remember, if this was the scripture that I learned at the time or I relied on, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And I kept repeating it over and over and over, maybe because of the level of pain, and you just can't understand why somebody would just give up and neglect their children and just wouldn't. So I took my healing journey extremely serious. And because I'd also purposed that I was going to be on a path to upleveling my own skill sets, because of my own resources at the time, there's no way I could just get up with 2 young kids and go to grad school. There's no way, because there were so many hurdles and pits and, pits and troughs and yes, along the way. I had to be careful exactly what I was doing. So I chose to do several short courses, short professional courses, because those were available. They could be done after work. And so that really helped me in terms of building my professional portfolio. At the time, I was in public relations. So I did exactly that. And then I went back to work with the government. When it happened, I was working in banking, and eventually I went to work with the government. And I knew beforehand that I would qualify for study leave. And so after working with them for the requisite number of years, I applied. I got my study leave. And off we went to Scotland with my 5-year-old, my 13-year-old, and later on my older daughter. And this was it was a life-altering experience.
Yeah.
It was not only life-altering because it opened up so many doors, not just the additional education that I was getting, but a Caribbean girl from a developing country, when you see the way that the world views developing country education and everything else, you realize that you have made the right decision for myself and for my children, because something that I came to understand at that point was that it didn't matter how smart you were, it didn't matter what degree you had, whether it was a first class honors or a second class honors. If it didn't come from the US, Canada, or the UK, it was not valued at the same level. And that still exists today. So that was entirely life-altering. And also, for my second child at the time, who was the one who was really most, I think, from the effects of the breakup, having been birthed into it, so to speak, she was really struggling emotionally. And I remember after being there for about a month, I said, "How is it you're so bouncy and bubbly?" And she said, "Mom, I'm rid of the emotional burden of my father." And when she said that to me at 13 years old, I was beyond shocked, because first of all, I didn't know she had that vocabulary. Then I realized there and then that she must have been, I knew she was hurting, but that indicated to me the depth of her hurt. And her response was like night and day. She became totally involved in school, and being a minority, a school where you probably have about 5 kids of color. Yeah, so she became really engrossed in school and co-curricular activities, and she really thrived. And at the same time, I felt a sense of relief, because it was such a struggle to get financial support. And by this, I had a third child. And I was also having a similar financial struggle, not in other areas. And I was just saying to myself, oh my God, what a relief. And then what was good is that they were offered like free transport to school. So I didn't have to worry about anything like that. So I've often said to people, my travels, when people talk about culture shock, and it should be negative, my travels have all been positive culture shocks. And so I would never give up anything for those experiences that I have had. So one's personal and professional growth is also another way to supplement your healing. And I think they are inextricably intertwined, because if you are getting ahead in life, what you're doing is that you're boosting your own self-esteem and your self-worth, and you are becoming more emotionally secure, because you're building that belief in yourself, not just emotionally, but in real terms as well. And so that reliance on others, even though as dads, they should be showing up, but you can now say to yourself, no one can hold me to ransom. So that again was inextricably intertwined with my own healing. So one's growth is definitely, you can't disentangle the two.
Oh.
You have to focus on, where in life do I want to take myself? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to be in 10 years' time? What do I want to be happening to my children? What do I want to be their reality? What do I want the opportunities to be for them? So throughout my life, I've never said what if. I've always said what's next, because you have to be thinking ahead when you have children. And I said to myself, look, there is no way I can afford not to evolve with these guys, because if I don't evolve, I'm going to devolve. And that was not an option when I have 3 kids that were dependent on me, and there were 3 girls. So the Heal, Thrive, and the Heal, Grow, and Thrive, we thrive also by building connections, social support, community. Your natural default position when a relationship breaks up, for many of us anyway, is shame. What did I do wrong? That inward, you're just digging inward. And it's always about, feeling a sense of shame. It's self-inflicted. It doesn't do you any good. That self-condemnation that we feel, we tell ourselves these kind of shame scripts. And we may have had a horrible spouse. Nobody wants you. I'm damaged goods. Whatever that negative that's playing out in your mind, whatever those little gremlins come and whisper, you are no good, you're unwanted, nobody will want you again. All of these crazy things come to us in those moments of insecurity when we feel so rejected. And those feelings want to take you into isolation. No, isolation is going to take you to a place of darkness where you're cut off from connection. We were built for connection. In utero, we had an umbilical cord connecting us to our moms for nourishment. It is the very same that we need community for nourishment, encouragement, and support. And if we cut off ourselves, we are undermining our healing and our growth. And each and every one of us have an inner circle, right? And we can create that and those additional connections, finding people who have gone the journey with us. I remember my own example of running into a friend, and we had worked together. And I was telling her, I felt so badly at the time when I was telling her, the same shame thing digging at you.
Yeah.
And I said to her, Dorothy, I'm now separated and whatever. And she looked at me and she said, you too? And at the time, I didn't know she had been separated for some years. But it was so reassuring, because what she was really saying is that, welcome to the club, right? Welcome to the club. You are not special. And so I learned that day, it felt like such a sense of relief. And I have learned the value of community and the value of, building connections and reaching out to people who have been on your journey and know what that struggle looks like. And it is so important that we do not internalize the shame, but we do the very opposite of reaching out to people and, sharing in as much as you are able to share at the particular time, because, the sharing that we do is directly related to the point of the healing journey that we are at.
Exactly. First of all, thank you for sharing your story with myself and my audience and trusting this platform with your journey. I truly appreciate that. I really, really do. Gosh, there's just so much in all of that you shared. Your mindset is incredible. And your mindset that has taken you on your healing journey is incredible. And now you teach this to others, and it's just like, oh, you did not go through that for nothing. You're living in your purpose. And I just think that is beautiful. I have so many parts of your story. I'm like, yeah, me too. Me too. I remember. Oh my God, me too. Because I remember in my own healing journey being so hurt, being so depressed, having so much anxiety, having so much shame, withdrawing from everybody. I didn't want anyone. And then when I was in front of people, I was acting like I was okay, and I was not okay. and I was losing a lot of weight. You can really see like all of my bones, but I'm telling myself, no, you're fine. You're fine. You're strong. Because if I show anybody my air quote weakness, right, then they're going to think I'm weak. And it was just a lot of bad self-talk to myself. And it was my children that initiated my healing journey. It was my son that pretty much said, "Mom, I see you. You're not happy." He was 5, and he was asking me who made me so sad so he can go beat him up, is what he said. And I was like, "Oh, wait, I thought I was, like, really putting on a face." That's when I realized I had to heal for them to have the best life. And my daughter was only 10 months at the time. And I said, "There's no way she can watch her mom go through this and think it's okay." Like my mom did it. So if I'm going through any type of pain, my mom covered it up. I don't want that for my
No,
babies.
no.
Let me get my life
Mhm.
together. And they started my journey. And you're right. Had I not went through that process, got myself together, elevated my education, did all the things, I wouldn't have this podcast today. I
No, you
would not
wouldn't.
be where I am and doing the things I'm doing and traveling and speaking and having this business had I not did the work then, had I not elevated myself to say, "Girl, you're not about to be here. Yes, life happened to you, but what did you learn from that? How did you take that? Well, what are you gonna do with that?" And so you're right. I had to grow and thrive and
Mhm.
heal, for them, but it was also for me.
Absolutely. And the thing about it, the point you made about your 5-year-old, our children learn more from what we do than from what we tell them. So they are seeing, they have a front row seat to what's going on. And that's one, as I'm glad you said that, it became your motivation for healing as well, because we can't show up for them if we are hurting, because they're seeing the pain. When dad calls, mom's in tears, mom's face is grimacing.
Yeah.
Um, when the phone rings, she puts it away. She doesn't want to see it. She doesn't want to see that number turning up. And they pick up on all of this kind of stuff. They
And we
do.
often think like, "Oh, they're so young, they don't know what's going on." Oh, they know. They know more than we think they know. And I learned that. I definitely learned that. When it came to community, that part too, I went to therapy because my depression, that dark place, like when you talk about being alone and having those dark thoughts, it got really, really, really bad. I never want to be there again. I haven't been there. It was very scary for me to be in that place of hurt and depression. And I never thought I would be there, like you just think like nothing's going to happen to me, that not me type of thing. And I was definitely there. But when I started going to therapy, I was mad at my therapist too because she pushed me. She pushed me. She
Mhm.
needed to push me because I'm like really strong willed. But she knew like, ooh, and she pushed me to process what I was going through and what I was really feeling. And I used to say, "I'm good," or "I'm okay." And she's like, "What does that mean? No, what do you feel, girl? Say it. This is your safe space." And she taught me
Mhm.
that. I used my social media as therapy too at that time because what I would do is I would come back and I started to share what I learned in therapy that day. I would post
Mhm.
a picture of me and the kids, and I would make the caption be my therapy lesson. And when I did that, the amount of women that were like,
Mhm.
"Girl, me too. I'm
Yes,
going through that
exactly.
too," or "I went through that
Mhm.
too." It blew my mind.
Absolutely. We can't shove the pain on the carpet. We have to name it so that we can make it. If we don't name it, face it, we won't make it. That's the bottom line. We just have to. And as you said, if you had remained in that position of not wanting to deal with it, that depression would have taken you down to rock bottom. And then your children would be reeling from the effects of that. So we all get to sometimes the pits and the troughs, but we have to recognize us when our kids are involved. that we have to hang on to life like a bulldog hanging on to a bone. We just can't give up. And we have to dig in to the deepest parts of our innermost being to keep going and to have that ability to fight and to build the resilience, because that is what we are ultimately building, the coping mechanisms to adapt to the new life we are experiencing, to be able to raise our children and to co-parent effectively if there's a willing co-parent on the other hand. And that's something I feel very strongly about, that as long as the person is willing to engage in the life of the kids, to deprive a child is basically chopping the heart of that child in two. Because even though things may have soured between the parents, children, they love both parents. That's the bottom line. I think that's the way God made us as human beings, that we came from a union, and therefore we are genetically, biologically, and spiritually connected to both parents. And only that parent can basically sever the connection. And when we do that to our kids, it's absolute cruelty.
What would you say to the parent that, or the mom, I would say, that she's just in so much pain that she doesn't want to co-parent? The kids want their dad, but she's like, no, because you put me through X, Y, and Z. How do you work your clients through that situation?
I totally understand. Some of us have been through physical violence. Some of us have been through threats. Some of us have had child support withheld. Some of us have had it been used as leverage for parenting time. Some of them, they move far away and move in with another partner, like the next week after the breakup, and they want you to take the children 40 miles or whatever. Here's what I would say. The pain can be so acute in those early days. You need someone who is going to act as a proxy for you. Maybe it's a mom. Maybe it's a trusted friend that you both had. Or maybe it's just your trusted friend. But I believe there is a period in time, cooling off, and I think it's on both sides, where there needs to be an intervention, and it's in the best interest of everyone to have a neutral party, like do handovers. We have to focus on nonverbal communication. So we do emails and we do messaging, because the emotional pot is boiling and everything is raw. And therefore it is just important that cooling period for whatever season. For some, it might be 3 months. For some, it might be 6 months. For some people, it may be longer. But it's important that that person who is going through that particular issue acknowledge that this is it. And you say to whoever it is that's in your inner circle, I can't do this. I'm going to need you to do the handover for me. I am going to need you to communicate X if it has to be done verbally, but it is a legitimate issue and nobody should be judged for it, because we all go through deep emotional pain. And until we get to that point where we are sufficiently healed, there is absolutely nothing wrong. It's in the best interest to have a proxy, because guess what? Parents are killing each other out there in the parking lots at handovers.
Yeah.
This is real life. This is not a joke.
You're
this
right.
is real life, right? People FaceTime the other partner and shoot the kid on the FaceTime. So this is serious. So we want to minimize emotional triggers, because people are already triggered from whatever issues they're having. So you don't want to push anybody beyond ability to cope. So there's absolutely a point of proxy at the time when you need it.
Yeah, there's a way. There's a way.
There is a way.
You know, like you said, that's where that community part comes in too, reaching out to someone that you know and trust, to say like, hey, this is my situation right now. This is the truth. the raw of what it is. And I do need help with communication or drop offs and things of that nature, because
Absolutely.
ultimately the goal is to have the relationship, we're co-parenting, is to have a relationship with the kids and,
Absolutely. A
take.
child, a parent-child centered relationship. It's
Mhm,
no longer about being lovers. You are now caregivers.
mhm.
That's what you are. You have moved on from lovers to caregivers,
Yep. So it's ultimately what's in the best interest
just of the
of
children.
the children. And I think that's why I think the healing journey, period, is so important. It's so important. We can't skip over that. We can't
No,
skip over it.
absolutely not. It is a total prerequisite, even building other relationships that we will go on to form, whether they're intimate relationships or whether they are relationships with former in-laws. Your children still need their grandparents. They need their aunts and uncles. These people are not guilty of anything. So the healing is absolutely, that onus is on both parents to do it. And I would say, moms, you need to do it, because more often than not, the mom is the custodial parent, even though, shared parenting now is the way to go. But inevitably, it's the mom who usually takes the brunt of that parenting journey. And so you don't want to be alienating grandparents, uncles, people who are good to you, people who you had relationships with. Some of us met our spouses through brothers and sisters, who were schoolmates and so forth. So you just don't want that whole circle to fall apart and for money to spill over and bitterness, because it is not going to serve anyone well. And the children need the support system of that extended family, especially when it comes to their celebratory times. And what I always say is that we're never going to get rid of each other. The children are going to grow up. There's going to be graduations. There are going to be engagement parties. There are going to be marriages. There are
Wedding.
going to be weddings. There are going to be baby christenings. We can't get away. So we have to find a new model of civility in our co-parenting, where we look out for each other, because each of us represents support for our children. So it's in our best interest to ensure that that civility exists, that if mom's car breaks down today, dad can come and pick up the children, or dad can offer to take mom to the car repairs. You would do that for a friend, so why not?
Yeah.
This is the question I ask. Why not? Why is this? Why does it have to be so acrimonious?
Yep.
And so we have to think carefully. And that's our healing journey will teach us and bring us to a place where we become responsive and not reactive. Because in those early days, we can be very reactive because, as I said, the emotional part is on the boil, it's on a high temperature. And so everything is spilling out all over the place. No way around it.
Yeah. Those beginning
Yeah.
days were rough, aggravating each other,
Yeah.
purposely doing
Yeah.
things, saying things, pushing buttons, like
Mhm.
all the
Yes.
things. And it can be so difficult to navigate. But once you go through that healing journey and you learn the lessons from it and you realize what's important, which are the children, how can we do this in the best interest of the children? And what's going to ensure that the parents have a very healthy co-parenting relationship? I think that
Yeah.
that is definitely key.
If we don't work it out, we're going to act it out.
And we don't want to act it out. Yes. We
Absolutely
don't need
not.
no acting out at all, because it does happen. You're right. Looking at the news and things, there's are situations that happen that could have ultimately been avoided.
Absolutely.
Absolutely been avoided. You're amazing. You really are. And just your story is just so powerful, and so many lessons that you have just taken from that experience. I want to ask, how important was it to do your self reflecting? Because I feel like that's where the lessons come from.
self-reflection is an important part of building your resilience. If each and every one of us could really focus and say, what is my motivation at this time? What is my responsibility? What is it that I need to do? Where should be my focus? Well, I believe in this kind of relationship, we have to put the children front and center, because when we put them front and center, all the other issues of what he did and what he didn't do, or what she did or what she didn't do, I think they'll become so low priority that we are able to have a focus to say, okay, these kids, I need to focus. They have to eat. So I have to focus on providing for them. They have to go to school. I have to focus on, they have to have co-curricular activities. And so those priorities become so important that you realize that you need to do only what is going to uplift you, to provide the emotional and the spiritual strength to keep that focus on delivering for your kids. And that has to be really a lot of emotional strength. And we build our resilience from creating that survivor mentality, right? Not the victim and victimhood mentality. This, I'm a survivor and I have to move forward and I have to keep trudging along. And every day needs to be a better day, because as we go through it, we're going to have highs and lows. That's just a reality of what happens. Focusing on our emotional self-regulation. I know I had to do that. So no matter the anger you feel, no matter the emotional pain of what he did, it's a stressful time, but you have to be able to manage those emotions, manage that anger, and let it subside in the face of everything else that's going on. And create an internal desire or a locus of control that is so focused on the fact that I can affect the outcome of this situation. I can determine who I become in this season. I am not going to be bitter. I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to be a hater of him or anybody else. And I know that was me, because I didn't grow up in a family life where that was reflected. So maybe that may have been easier for me than many other people. But I had that determination that I'm coming out of this as a better human being. I'm coming out of this achieving all I want to achieve, right? Because I know that maybe if I had been with my ex, I maybe would never have made it to graduate school. Because I remember in my early days of my marriage, indicating that to him. And he said to me, how is that going to happen? Right? And focusing on our problem solving, right? Because some people, you just can't work with them in terms of some of the issues. So you become focused on your problem solving issues. And this is where your community also helps, whether it's family or extended family or just friendships that you have built. And there were friendships that I had built that were so supportive, and I could bounce something off of them. And, sometimes they would have an answer for me or a suggestion, right? So that is why we have to have the three-pronged approach: the personal healing journey, your plans for personal and professional growth, and that connection with community of people who support you and who have been on the journey and who are several steps ahead of you.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not only, I remember there was this elderly couple who came into my space because their granddaughter and my eldest went to school together. And I remember they were always there cheering me on. Yes, you're going to get through it. It's going to be a better day. And I used to say to myself, what are they saying? A better day? When is that? So social support and having that network of people who see what you're going through, but they're seeing you through when you can't see yourself through. It is a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous benefit as you go through this season of your life. Because what we don't realize is that the breakup from marriages and relationships that we have been heavily invested in. It's trauma. And we need to call it for what it is. It is trauma.
Yeah.
And they say the only trauma that is greater than this is the death of a partner. That's what psychologists say.
Yeah.
And so many of us want to gloss over it, but no, you have to go through it because it is trauma, and trauma needs healing, right?
You go through
So
the
that's a
grieving
fact of
process.
life. Absolutely, the grieving process. And I have what I call the 5 F's of separation and divorce: the fight, the flight, the freeze, the freak out. And the Christian will say it's part of gate. It can be a wild season for some of us.
Yeah.
And it's just a period of, it can be a period of immense emotional instability. So for each and every one of us, it's different. But that healing journey, it is a must.
Definitely.
If not, you will be wobbling along for a long season in your life before you get to that point where you say, nope, it must happen.
You'll find yourself in the same spot you're in back when everything happened if you don't start going through that healing journey. But I remember too having that social support, and I'm laughing because it was the same thing for me, because she would say, Chiquita, I know it's rough. I know, come here. And she would grab my hand. I know it's rough, and I know you're going through it, but listen, I see your lights, okay? And when you get to that light, your life is going to change. And I'd be like, what?
When is that?
What light? I don't see no light. I just see darkness. I am stressed. I am frustrated. Like, and then I would get a little angry, like, she's not listening to what did I just tell her? And she was right. She was right.
She was absolutely right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I needed her. I needed my community. I needed my older women, all older. I needed my elders to support.
Very valuable.
I needed their wisdom and advice and just willingness to allow me to be. I needed that. And even when I was angry with them because I didn't think they heard me, now I'm like, no, they heard you, girl. They were just telling you to keep going and keep pushing. I'm so thankful for them. I'm thankful. And even now when they're like, look at everything you're doing. Oh my God, I didn't think I could do this. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. Our story becomes someone else's survival guide. And as this is happening every day, it's happening every day, right? More than 1 in 3 marriages are falling, so it's happening daily.
Every day. And this is why we create platforms like this, so that you guys listening can hear our stories and someone else's story and hopefully connect and know that if we can do it,
you can too.
Do it too. You've been absolutely amazing today. And I want to thank you so much for being on the Beating You podcast. Can you please tell the audience where they can find and connect and even work with you?
Okay, so first of all, my email is Johnston, that's JOHNSTON.CLOVER@gmail.com. I am also on Instagram as Co-Parenting Coach Clover. And I am just about setting up my Facebook account again. And I'm also on YouTube, Clover Johnston.
Yes.
So
yes,
you can connect with me. Sure.
Yes, I'll make sure that all of your links, email, everything is in the show notes, because you want her as a co-parent coach. You need that experience, someone that's gone through it, and that's going to speak the truth.
Yes.
The truth.
And I'm also a public speaker. So if you want me to do any public speaking for you in this area, I am available.
Yes. Oh, wow. You've been amazing, like I said, and you've touched so many. I know already. This is going to be a good one. I'm going to keep you posted on it.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure and a delight. And I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Listen, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that bell and subscribe. And if you're listening wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to leave that review. All right, you guys, until next time.